Welcome back to another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. You know how much I love this, you guys. I am a recovering 6-year-old, and I love it when people come and read out loud to me. I just have the best time. I'm so happy to share it with you. Today, I'm introducing you to Alfredo Botello. He is a new to me author, coming all the way from California. I'm so excited to have you on the program. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to do this. This is great.
I love doing this. I've met authors from all over the world, and it's so nice to reconnect with people of like minds. So thank you so much for indulging me.
Likewise, it's an indulgence for me to be able to read. Thanks. Great.
So just real quickly, tell us a little bit about your writing journey. How did you get to um, where you are now? Two novelists, you have won awards in writing, in screenplays. You're a past architect in a different life. You have a restaurant. How did you decide that writing was going to be your life's calling?
It really began in high school. I had a teacher, and he gave us the option to do a free essay, to write whatever we wanted to. And I thought, well, great, that's easy. And I thought, what am I going to write about, though? And I had been in middle school. My mom had signed me up for a cotillion class where you learn how to dress in a suit and tie and how to ask a young lady if she likes to dance. And you had to learn the foxtrot, and you had to learn the box step, and you had to, it was run by, I kid you not, the man's name was Commander Unander, and he wore what looked to my eye like a Civil War dress outfit with his wife, the gracious Mrs. Unander. The
That's
whole thing was,
fantastic.
yeah, I'll never forget that name. And it was completely traumatic. I was, first of all, I was just sweating, sweating uncontrollably in my suit. I didn't know how to pour a glass. I spilled a punch as I poured it for the young lady. We had anonymous gift exchanges. I always felt like I gave the worst gift and got the, anyway, it was awful. So I just thought, well, I'm going to write about how miserable I was. So I wrote about that. And I think that was the first time I kind of found my voice just as a person.
Sure.
Anyways, I didn't really pursue it. So in college, I didn't go to English or creative writing. I was doing architecture and German. Don't ask me why. I mean, I love them, but I just kind of avoided what I think came more naturally. And then in my 20s, while I was working in a small architecture office, a great place, I loved it. People were great. The work was great. But I felt like I was okay, but I wasn't really, it wasn't a perfect fit for me. For some reason, something about it, I was more like an appreciator than a practitioner.
Okay.
But all the time, then I started writing on Spec magazine articles about architecture, or more like the middle school article I wrote about going to an art show and being on the subway in San Francisco, getting to the art show, and staring at the people around me and wondering what their day was like. So I just wrote about that, and that was much closer to what became my writing. And then on a complete lucky lark, and here I have to say I didn't go to film school, but my dad, who was a first generation immigrant from Spain, I think, he was about 40 years old. He didn't know what to do with me on the weekends after my parents split. So we were in Hollywood. We would just go to movies, double, triple features. So movies got burned in my brain. So
Okay.
I want to write movies. And my second or third attempt at a screenplay, I had some real luck. There's a particular contest put out there, which, but it's by the people who do the Academy Awards, where if you're one of the winners, it does get you attention. You're in the trades and you get calls from producers and agents. And that kicked off my career in earnest. That was 25 years ago. So since then, I've been a professional screenwriter, and it's not a restaurant, but a bar that I own. That came as a fluke. That's just a device to, I sell alcohol just because I don't have to open until 4 p.m. and it gives me my mornings free and I don't have to be there all the time. So it gave me the
Right.
latitude to do what I wanted. And then the screenplays were happening. And one of the things about screenwriting is it's great. When it's great, it's great. But if you were to ask me, hey, Alfredo, if you die tomorrow, because there's something you can give me that maybe if I didn't know you, I'd get a sense of you. I can give you a screenplay or two that was never produced, but that got me a lot of other jobs. But it's frustrating because a screenplay is a description of a movie. It's not really by itself. You can't go to the
Right.
store and buy, hey, can I get the screenplay to Citizen Kane? You can probably find it online, but it's not the same.
Yeah, yeah, it's very different. Just like a stage play, it is nothing without the actors. It's very different to read Shakespeare than to see it performed.
Perfect example, right?
Yeah.
It's a sort of intermediate kind of a vehicle thing. And so for me, between COVID and the Writers Guild, the Screenwriters Guild strike, which happened almost right after COVID, it was kind of a reset moment. And I thought, well, why don't if you write a novel and you're lucky enough to get published, hopefully you'll have less people's hands in the pie, telling you what to do. I don't. I love good editing. I just there's an old saying in Hollywood: good notes are great, bad notes are terrible, and that's kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
so. I thought, and it allowed me to flex a different muscle. So screenplay, you can't really explore your prose that much. You're kind of limited. It's a very strict form.
Sure. Yeah.
And I can write and not worry about whether the idea is marketable or sellable. I can hope it is, but I don't have to worry. And so that really, and then my first novel, the one before the one we're talking about today, it was such a great feeling and a great experience. And it was also done. It's now if I do have to die tomorrow and you ask me, what do you, what
Hmm.
do you have that might tell me something about me? Well, besides my girlfriend and my two dogs and my sons and the music I love, I would give you my copies of my novels because they're complete. So it's been very satisfying to flex those muscles. And that's
Yeah.
how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always believed that writing prose, even writing poetry, is so much a legacy that we get to leave, right? It's such a big part of who we are. So no matter what you write, it does become sacred and it becomes your legacy that for generations beyond your existence. And I think it's a really cool way to help people understand individuals from, all different cultures. I'm a writing word fanatic, so it's a little,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a little nutty that way. I would love to hear you read. Your novel is called Spin Cycle Notes from a Reluctant Caregiver. Give us a brief synopsis what this book is about.
Yes. So this book is about a man, a grown man. He's at his wit's end. His mother has dementia, and the burden it's put on him has just left him racked. He is overwhelmed. He is blindsided. He goes through, and the reason it's called spin cycle, he goes through moments of I'm feeling patient and calm toward my mom. Then I get there, and then she irritates me, and then I snap back, and then I feel ashamed about that. Then I feel embarrassed, but then I really feel frustrated. And why can't I do more? And I should be able to do more, but I really can't. And all of it just gets squashed. He's squashed by the guilt he feels. And so what he does, he's a high school teacher. So he goes to his go-to, which is, well, you know what? What I'm going to do to fix this, I'm going to open a school. And he opened something called APPA, Adults Patiently Parenting Adults. It's sort of, and to call it a school or academy is a bit lofty. It's really, he rents out a 1,200 square foot strip mall storefront for 6 months and finds actually 9 other lost souls, other caregivers who just
So
are.
he creates a support group.
He does. He creates
Yeah.
this. He does. He's like you said. He's because his home life is a wreck. His wife has left him. He's estranged. His son is 18. He's kind of in the sandwich generation. He's trying to take care of his
Hmm.
son still, and taking care of mom. He's exhausted. All that. So he creates this support group with the hopes that, well, maybe if I share some of my awfulness, other people will kind of share them too, and maybe we'll get a little bit better. But then he also has a secret agenda for doing this that he's not revealing. And I'm not going to spoil it in today's work or reading,
Good.
but just know if you're out there listening, he has an agenda beyond becoming a better caregiver, but he's not the only one. One of his students, a woman named Lily Coleman, and you'll hear from her today, she is there, and she seems like she's absolutely like, why is she there? She's an amazing caregiver. She works at a hospice, and some of her clients have dementia, and she's amazing at handling them. And we'll see some of that today. But she too has family secrets. So that get revealed over time. So the umbrella theme, this is the way I work with my writing. The umbrella theme here is compassion. What happens when we become so rigid and angry and stiff that we lose our ability to be compassionate, both toward people we love, but also toward ourselves? We're just a
Sure.
bundle of hard-heartedness. It's really hard. And his journey is to see, can he get something too from these other students, from his own experience, from this woman, Lily, as he sort of navigates his mom's year, the time he has with his mom there, visiting her and so on, to become a little softer, to find that little bit of compassion and love again. So that is his emotional journey throughout the book. And I just also want to just say that this is the book. I really was compelled to write it. So I wish I had the book 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, my mom, Lisa, the hero of my life. You have to know what you have to know about my mom. So growing up in the 70s, she was a badass. After the divorce from my dad, she just ate life. I mean, she took belly dancing lessons.
Wow.
But yeah, I remember her practicing in the living room. She took Sierra Club hikes. She volunteered at the Olympics as a translator because she speaks German and Spanish as well as English. She worked 2 jobs. I remember her handing out towels because I would go with her and stay in the break room, handing out towels at a posh tennis club. This is after her full-time job at IBM all day long, going there for the night shift, 6 to 10, handing out towels to, wealthy tennis players. Like this woman is an absolute badass and my hero. And 5 or 6 years ago, she was diagnosed with likely onset Alzheimer's, and I didn't understand what was going on. Her personality was changing. I didn't like it. She couldn't figure out her meds. She couldn't figure out her own wall calendar. And I was, rather than being like, "It's okay, mom, we'll figure it out together," I just snapped at her like, "What is wrong with you? This is so
Yeah.
simple." You
Yeah,
know,
because it's so different a response to life than what you'd been used to.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
wasn't that person anymore. And
Yeah.
I'm ashamed at how I would handle it. Like I say, I was snippy, catty. I was impatient when I would get calls from, when she'd misplaced her car and the clerk at Walmart called me, or when I tried to arrange a Lyft or an Uber for her and she went into a stranger's car rather than, being happy and grateful that the stranger was nice and brought her back to the bank where I could pick her up. I was just like, this is so embarrassing. Don't humiliate me. I would say,
Yeah.
if you keep this up, I'm not going to visit you anymore. I mean, that is mean stuff to
Yeah,
say.
it's
And
hard.
I'm an only child and she's the only one I have. So to say something that mean, I feel totally ashamed. So, so I wish if anybody picks up this book and goes, oh, that character is saying or doing something that I would have done and said, and at least I'm
Mm-hmm.
not the only one out there, because I find
Sure.
when you read, regardless of the subject matter, nonfiction, fiction, doesn't matter. If somebody says something that's a little bit vulnerable and honest, like I immediately connect and I feel comforted. So that's where I really want the reader to feel like they feel this like you're not alone.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I'm so glad that you found the courage to write this book because it sounds like it's a story a lot of people need to hear. So I'm really, really pleased. And I'm excited to be able to hear some of it. This is really wonderful. Um,
Yeah, thanks.
so I'm gonna just let you do your thing, but before I do, I want to remind our listeners out there, I'm always trying to prepare our audiences for whatever we may be reading on a particular day. And I know sometimes we have little ears in the room. And I want to make sure that the big ears in the room understand that in today's reading, there might be some adult language. So you might want to preview this episode before you let the little ears listen to it. So, sir, when you are ready, please spin cycle Notes from a Reluctant Caregiver. Take the
Absolutely.
microphone and read aloud.
Thank you. And I just want to give a little bit of setup to the scene because it's not the first chapter. I'm roughly in the middle of the book.
Sure.
So in this scene, the protagonist, Ezra, the one who set up the school, one of his students, Lily, who also has a family secret, which will come out over time, she has invited him to come see her at her job where she's working at this hospice and taking care of people. And it's baffling to the protagonist because she's so good at what she does. He doesn't understand why she would even come to his class. She seems to be an expert already. That'll get unfolded over time. I think that's all you really need to know to set this up. So let me dive in.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Lily, I said. My voice jumped a few octaves. I sounded like an 8th grader. Guess I was more than a little surprised that the Ice Queen had stuck around. She had been lingering as the others left, holding a manila envelope against her chest. Ezra, do you have a moment? Sure. It was nice to be called Ezra, not Mr. Pavic or coach or teach or professor. I was already suffering badly enough from imposter syndrome. The way she wrapped herself in her arms, the lacerating look in her eye, that mysterious envelope. What collateral was she holding? Had she taken pictures of me being mean to mom? I pictured the ugly, contorted face I surely must make when I tell mom to use the bathroom before we go to Starbucks. Then she needs to use it anyway. It's so lopsided. From the moment we are born, the world primes us for when we have our own kids. The books, the videos, the dolls sold to little girls and boys. Our own little cherubim. How to parent with kindness, what to expect, the amused patience and compassion we are supposed to have developed for the extra bathroom trips, the little tantrums, wandering down the block, all the stuff that mom does now. If our little ones play, eat, shit, and sleep, we're happy. That's enough. That's all they have to do. All of that patience and compassion, at least if you're me, vanishes when you have to take care of a slightly older child doing the same things, one who's in her seventh decade on the planet. They aren't kids, so just being and playing isn't good enough. They aren't broken grown-ups, as Sweet Pea said, yet we expect them to reason and remember like we grown-ups do. There's something else, but our world hasn't primed us for that, hasn't told us it's something worth loving and celebrating. I think about this all the time. I try to be better, to appreciate mom for who she is now. But I wasn't thinking about that right then. I was thinking about the look in Lily's eye, the envelope. I braced myself for whatever was coming. I had said, sure, the ball was now in her court. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? She asked, and of course, one for myself. Sure, I said again, needing a moment to disentangle myself from the drubbing I had been expecting. The way she said, can I buy you a cup of coffee? The ice cream was thawing. I had no idea why. There's a place pretty close by, I told Lily, Brood Awakening. It's a mom and pop shop, and Philip, my son, he religiously avoids Starbucks, any chain. It's his, well, he's 19. If you don't think you can make a difference at 19, you probably never will. I couldn't stop the verbal diarrhea. But me, I'm not idealistic. I'd given up. There's probably was a time when I thought I could make a difference, but that's just speculation. I was probably never idealistic. I rarely think past my own belly button. I think she was amused by my nervous radio static. I'm fine with Starbucks, she said. There's one close by, but hey, if you prefer a mom and pop, that's cool too, your call. She smiled gently, letting me know she had experience with rambling idiots. Sometimes they play the music at Starbucks too loud for me, she said. I'm getting old, I guess. She smiled again. Maybe there was no drubbing coming. She has a lovely smile. Don't know why she doesn't flash it more often. What, Danny? Nothing. Obviously, I had a crush on her. But my mind, all this stuff with mom, I think it's also stolen my libido. But yeah, she's attractive. We left the academy. Did I just say academy? God help me. I locked up the door. The guy who runs the liquor store next to me, Nagasi, flashed me a bro smile. I tried to tell him with my eyes, it's not like that. He smiled a little wider. Do you always check the handle 4 or 5 times? Lily asked me. At least. I've always been a, are you sure you turned the stove off kind of guy. Oh, so if you get dementia, you'll have been practicing. She hadn't really joked in class. It took me a few seconds to get it. Plus, if there's a way to be both soft and wry with your tone, she has it. Maybe I just have OCD, I told her. Yeah, I'm the opposite, she told me. My car's been cleaned out twice, forgot to lock it. But at least no windows were smashed. Now I leave it unlocked on purpose. It's just an old beater anyway, she said. I wondered what beater meant to her, the way Lily dressed, the blouses, the summer dresses, the elegant boots. Someone that put together might not drive an expensive car, but I had trouble picturing a, quote, beater. I told her where Brood Awakening was. She drove a Honda Civic. There were a few faded blotches on the roof from the sun, but you couldn't call it a beater. I drive mom's old car, a Prius. Had to stop making fun of Prius drivers after that. And gave Philip my old car. Like I said, he salvaged it somehow. The thing barely ran. I mostly take the bus to work anyway. I hate driving. Too stressful. And I can't daydream or even fret properly when I'm behind the wheel anyway. So we get in our cars, and on the drive over, I think, shit, Brood Awakening is probably going to be packed, and we're going to end up at Starbucks anyway. But there was an open table in the back, private. No one to overhear us except a brick wall with some hanging plants. I pulled up my wallet when we got to the counter, but Lily practically shoved her credit card into the cashier's face. I asked you to come, my treat. We took a sheet. She cut her blueberry muffin in half. Want to help me take the edge off the sugar high I'll be on in about 10 minutes, she asked. The muffin looked much better than the million ones I had bought for the APA classes. I ate my half in one bite. She was wearing, I don't know if this is the right word, a kind of chunky necklace, large stones, polished, kind of different shapes, the kind of thing my mom wore in the 70s. You're probably wondering what's on my mind, she said. Oh, I said, feigning surprise for no reason, as if we were just there to sample muffins. Sure, of course. I want to thank you for doing this. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I smiled and nodded over eagerly. And what would this be? The class, reaching out to the lost causes. I wondered if she had noticed yet that I was trying not to stare at her high cheekbones and hazel green eyes. I remember, she said, graduating high school and realizing the most useful classes I took were typing and driver's ed. I charged $20 a piece for typing up other kids' term papers my sophomore and senior years. Nice. I took typing too, didn't profit off it though. So yeah, missed opportunity. She sipped her coffee. They served them in actual china cups, mismatched, hipster style at Brood. Do you like teaching? She asked. Some days, I said. We both sipped at our coffees. Work, right? She said. The old AI voice was gone. There was a sadness, muted maybe, but definitely sadness in her voice. She had kind of gone quiet, so I just blurted out what came to my mind. What's in the envelope? I asked. Oh, yes, it's part of how I'm trying to be better with mom. Her voice trailed off and she looked sort of vacant for just a second. Then she sat up straight, smiled, and said, okay, I didn't just ask you here to tell you about my high school typing class. I want to show you something. I'm a volunteer at a hospice center. Some of my clients have dementia. Okay, I said, not knowing what she had in mind, but hoping I would be standing next to her for whatever it was. I trust you, she added. What you said in there about your marriage collapsing, whatever's going on with your son, that absolute nightmare with your mom in the parking lot, that insane rant on our first day of class, you're honest. I need that. I was so astonished, I said nothing. Do you have time right now? She asked tentatively. I didn't want to act too eager, of course, so I fake pumped the brakes, went quiet, like I had to rearrange some stuff on my Saturday morning calendar. I overdid it, I guess, because she took my pause and said, that's okay. It doesn't really matter. No. It's all good. I have this one thing, but it's not until next week I blurted out. And it's on a Sunday anyway. It was an obvious lie, but she was gracious enough not to let me know that she knew. If you could tag along today, she said, give me some notes, All I ask is that you don't pull punches. Stay honest. Compliments feel great, but they don't help anyone. I didn't tell her that I violently, vehemently disagreed, that I felt like compliments were just about the only thing that did matter in my life. So I said, sure, I'll give you my honest 2 cents. Great, she said. Probably owe you more than a cup of coffee and half a muffin for this. Let's bookmark that. Oh, I bookmarked it immediately. Specific date, TBD. The center isn't far, she added. I hear hospice or care center or nursing home, and I automatically expect some stucco abomination. Apologies to Carl Fratelli. Ugly tile ceilings, scuffed up floors, bleach smell, asbestos just sort of hanging in the air. But it wasn't like that at all. The place was called Vista House. Vista, a view. It actually had one of the backyard. It was overgrown. It was big. It was beautiful. It's in the Crenshaw district. It's this grand old craftsman house, the kind that gets chopped into a zillion apartments after a white flight. The outside siding was this pastel violet. And while I normally hate pastels, in the 1980s, mom, quote, did my colors and said I was a winter. So just primaries, white, navy, black, red for me, no pastels. But it was just so peaceful. I told Lily, I love the colors, they're defiant. Defiant? She asked, confused. Yeah, I said, death and pain are happening here, maybe, in the reverse order, but we're all going to be there soon enough. But greet that with, Easter egg colors. It's cheerful. That's what I'm trying to say. Defiant about the end. You could have gone, I don't know, black and gray, but you went cheerful. She arched her eyebrows and said, well, I don't know. I didn't pick the colors. They're fine. She looked right at me, and with the gentlest of eyes said, anyway, for me, in the end, it's not how long you live, it's how much. It was a 2-story home with a little attic window poking out from the roof. It was sunny inside, big wood sash windows covered in 1,000 coats of paint. The sun bounced off the wood floors. I remember squinting. If the place had been chopped into little apartments, they must have unchopped it. It was spacious, at least on the first floor. There was a fireplace when you first walked in, old tall ceilings, definitely plaster, not asbestos. The kind of place I could imagine dying in. Lily told the woman at the front desk I was, quote, a visiting scholar. The woman at the desk gave me a little nod. I could tell Lily's smile was really all the vouch I needed to be let in there. We headed up the wide staircase. On the second floor, there was a long hallway with maybe 5 or 6 doors off it. Lily stopped for a second and turned to me. Mrs. Drake has pancreatic cancer and dementia. About 10 feet further up was a door that was already open. Lily knocked on it, an orange door, Halloween pumpkin orange. Knock, knock, said Lily. It's me, Mrs. Drake, Lily. She walked in a few steps. I stopped at the doorway and watched. I could see inside it looked like a normal bedroom. Nightstands next to a bed, a wood-back chair for visitors. There was a plant in a pot on a little table near the window with a small yellow flower in bloom. There were a few prints of paintings on the walls. One was a seascape, the kind of thing you'd see in a hotel lobby, but the others were personal. A photo which looked fairly recent. A short woman, Mrs. Drake, and what I assumed was her short husband were flanked by two very tall, husky boys, early 20s maybe, big smiles. Her grandkids, I guessed. And next to it, an older photo, maybe 1970s, of a young woman sitting on the floor of her living room, smiling coyly, her floral dress spread out around her. This was a young Evelyn Drake, Lily told me later. In the hospital bed, which was tilted up a bit, lay a tiny woman. Mrs. Drake wasn't young, but she wasn't that old. Maybe mid-60s, I want to say, but it's hard to say. When death comes, I've seen it in hospitals, and I saw it with my grandfather, it just shrinks you. You go from 50 to 80 overnight. Mrs. Drake's hair was still thick. It was mostly white, but the ends were a kind of reddish brown. I'm not sure how fast hair grows, but it must have been months since she dyed it last. I remember wondering, was she just no longer able to dye it, or did she no longer care? Had the doctors given up on any treatment that might have caused her to lose hair? The skin around her eyes was sunken, dark. Lily walked in a few more feet and said, "You look beautiful today, Mrs. Drake." "Lily," said Mrs. Drake, "who is this? I must look a fright." "This is my teacher, Mr. Pavic." Lily flashed me a look. "Come on, silly, she's not contagious." I was still standing in the doorway. I walked in and walked over to the bed, put out my hand, and Mrs. Drake shook it. She had a very gentle, light grip. Mrs. Drake looked at Lily, reached up with both her hands, grasped Lily's hands, and pulled her in a little closer, whispering, "He's very handsome," as if I couldn't hear. Mrs. Drake smiled at me, the same coy smile as in the photo. Then she said to Lily, "Can you bring me..." Her voice trailed off and she furrowed her brow. She looked frustrated and sad. I know the look. It's the same look Mom had when she couldn't think of the word restroom at the restaurant. Lily said nothing and brought over a makeup case. Mrs. Drake smiled again. Either Lily is a fantastic mind reader, or they had done this many times before. Lily handed Mrs. Drake a tray out of the case, like a palette, with a mirror built into the lid. My mom had one like that. Mrs. Drake tried to take the tray, but her hand shook. She was about to drop it, but Lily was right there. She caught it before it could fall. "Oh, I have an idea," said Lily. "Can I try something? If you hate it, we'll change it, but I think you'll love it." Mrs. Drake smiled and said, "Okay." She glanced at me again, a little embarrassed, or maybe I was the one who was a little embarrassed, like I was watching her get dressed. So I turned around, just looked at the flower in the pot, the seascape print. Those seascapes aren't so terrible when you stare at them long enough. They're just there, about as inoffensive as can be. Now I know why they're in so many hotels. Lily cleared her throat, signaling that I could turn back around. When I did, she was finished putting blush on Mrs. Drake's cheeks. "What do you think?" Lily held the mirror side of the case up to Mrs. Drake's face. She said, "I look beautiful." Lily glanced at me, then glanced at me again, since I hadn't gotten the hint. "You look absolutely beautiful, Mrs. Drake," I said, then added one of my mom's favorite words, regal. She did look kind of regal, the narrow face, her elegant posture, even in that bed. "Oh, I'm just an old lady." She lobbed it up for me, so I swung. "A very beautiful, mature lady," I said. She turned to Lily and asked if she could have her makeup back. I wasn't sure why. Lily wasn't either, but she didn't blink. She brought the tray back out and didn't let go of it until it was safely over Mrs. Drake's lap. Mrs. Drake started putting more blush on herself. Her hands were shaking, and she was getting thick streaks of blush on her cheeks. She looked like a clown. She looked in the mirror and started crying. "You ruined everything," she yelled at Lily. "You bitch!" She wiped a cheek with one hand, smearing the blush even more grotesquely. "You ruined it!" I would have offered her a Starbucks latte right then and there if I could. It always works with my mom. Lily looked stricken a moment, then said, "You're right, I'm sorry." Mrs. Drake looked stunned, but something in her instantly calmed. "I look terrible." "We can fix this," Lily said. Mrs. Drake looked at Lily with what I'm pretty sure was hope in her eyes. "I made a mistake. I'll fix it." Mrs. Drake nodded. Lily put her hand on Mrs. Drake's. "I'm really happy to see you today," Lily said and smiled. Mrs. Drake smiled back. "We'll fix it. Hey, but did you see? It's beautiful out today. Did you see the jays, Mrs. Drake? The blue jays?" Mrs. Drake shook her head. "Should we look at the jays?" asked Lily. "Yes," said Mrs. Drake. I couldn't help it. I quick stepped to Mrs. Drake, kneeled down by her bed, and said, "Will you show me the jays, Mrs. Drake?" She nodded again. I glanced at Lily. She indicated I should get the folded wheelchair in the corner. I bought it over. The first time I tried to open one of those, it was a disaster. It was in the lobby of the ER with Mom. I kept trying to pull on anything that looked like a lever or push something that might be a button, but nothing happened with that goddamn thing. Wouldn't open, wouldn't budge. Finally, I went to the receptionist, where they'd taken mom's vitals when we first checked in. An orderly stepped around and gently pushed down on the folded seat, and the whole thing spread open. The intake nurse and the orderly laughed. We all did. It was ridiculous. I was looking for a complicated solution to a simple problem. All you have to do is gently push on the seat to get it to open. But in that moment with Lily and Mrs. Drake, I knew. And finally, after 7 years of enduring this exhausting learning curve, it all paid off. I went over and with what I like to think of as understated panache, I gently pushed down the folded vinyl seat and the chair spread open. Voila! Such grace and poise has never been seen. I wheeled it over and stood next to Lily as she helped Mrs. Drake into it. The woman couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds. Mrs. Drake smoothed her hair with her hand as we headed down the hallway, but she couldn't reach the back. Her hair was patted down in front and this rooster tail stood up in the back. Lily wheeled her to the biggest window in the hallway. It was a few feet from the staircase landing. I hadn't paid attention when we first arrived, but the window looked out onto that big backyard. I wish I knew the names of trees and shrubs and bushes better. I say yellow flower in a pot, but who the hell knows what that means? Celeste might have known. You know how it is when you read a novel and the author goes on and on about the jacaranda trees or the perky heliconias or mangrove, this and that. Well, all I can tell you is that there were many shades of green in that backyard. Trunks thick and thin, pale and dark. I don't know how I had missed all this beauty and variety when we first arrived, but there was one tree I thought I had a chance at naming correctly. Cherry blossom, I asked tentatively. The buds will open soon, said Lily. It's beautiful, they all are. I could imagine my son Sweet Pea playing in the backyard for hours as a little guy. He liked pretending he was on a different planet when we went camping. I also thought of a different planet. This very backyard in 1925, say. Everyone in their finest linen suits and dresses, candles on tables, musicians playing on a small bandstand, everyone laughing and drinking slow gin in my mind's eye. And there was the cherry blossom tree, this same one, watching over the party, watching the guests get louder as the alcohol flowed and the evening wore on, the next day's cleanup, the decades, year after year, people coming and going, living and dying, and the cherry blossom tree just quietly watching all of it. When I get lost in a memory, even if it's not mine, the memory becomes the present. I may be standing in line at the supermarket, but if I'm remembering the feel of warm sand between my toes when my mom took me to the beach as a kid, in that moment, I am not at the supermarket. I am 6 years old at the beach. Or maybe I'm at a garden party in the backyard of Vista, sipping slow gin with Zelda Fitzgerald. So I'll stop there. That's a little taste of a visit to Mrs. Drake.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
No, thank you.
I'm really excited to read this book. There's so many touchstones for me in this. My grandfather lived to be 104, so there are a lot of really, really
Wow.
gentle things in there that resonated with me. So I appreciate the writing. What have you got next? What's coming up next?
Yeah, so I've got some screenplay work that's happening, but I've begun my third novel. It's called Convergence. I don't want to give too much away again about it, but I'll just tell you the setup, which is you have 3 complete strangers who happen to cross paths at about 10 at night at a 7-Eleven in northern Reno. And they're all there for different reasons that are thematically related, but they have no idea why they who each other is. And something happens that puts them in a kind of a bit of a pressure cooker situation. And we kind of start to unfold what it is that these 3 strangers are doing together. They are strangers, and how they handle the situation. So that's all I can really say about it. So
that sounds intriguing. When do you expect that'll be available?
I'm going to guess about a year. I've only begun my first rough draft, and once you submit to a publisher, they have to get back to you, which
right.
which can be months.
Yes.
And then the on their end, once they say yes, my experience is it's anywhere from 6 months to 12 months to go through book design, editing, layout,
right.
etc. So with any luck at all, I would say a year to year and a half.
Okay.
That'll be out. Yeah.
Spectacular. I'm so glad to have met you today. Thank you so much for coming on the program, Alfredo. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it
Will
too.
you come back and read your other book for us too?
I'd be happy to. I'd be happy.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Likewise. Take care.